Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a while. Another episode of the Kettle Knights podcast. And I have with me a distinguished gentleman. His name is Levi Markwardt. Many probably know you from Levi's Harder to Kill training. Many people actually reached out under that banner. They're like, hey, you got to talk to Levi. And I had a pleasure to talking to Michael's son, who's also a kettlebell sport coach, who happens to be Levi's coach. And I follow Levi on Instagram. He's that, if you've seen him, he's that behemoth who's lifting these heavy ass kettlebells looking like a tank. And it's fascinating to have him finally on the show. And so, Levi, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. I've been following your work for years myself, so it's nice to be on your platform.
I appreciate it. So the first thing that we're going to do is, with all the people that are on the podcast, is we want to hear about those stories. So give us your background. How did you get started with kettlebells, with fitness? You said you're a gym owner before we started recording, and kettlebells, so go ahead.
Yeah, I graduated from university, in 2000, and I kind of fell backwards into the business ownership. I went to school to be a PE teacher, and just decided while I was doing that it probably wasn't going to work out, and I was losing my desire to be in that formal setting, and I kind of fell backwards then into the gym, the gym type setting. As a personal trainer, I went and got certified through the NSCA right out of college, and started working just as a, just working with kids on speed and development with the Athletic Republic. And I did that for a few years, and started working with adults slowly as well, as a personal trainer. And it's probably been about 14 years now since I was introduced into the kettlebells, and completely changed my philosophy on all kinds of training. A good friend of mine by the name of Joshua Bourbon originally introduced me to kettlebells. I had, it's kind of a funny story. It's funny to me anyway. I had a gym member that had 220s and 224 cast iron bells sitting in his office, and his plan was to use the bells, whenever he had free time in his office. And they just started collecting dust, and he just couldn't get, some people, you need to leave work at work, or leave home at home, and go to a specific place to do your training. And that's what ended up happening to him. So I took his 4 kettlebells as a down payment, like 6 months worth or 3 months, whatever it was, of a gym membership. And so he would come then to the gym and use my equipment. And I had these kettlebells that then started collecting dust at my gym instead of his office. And so Josh, who I just mentioned, had come and was visiting back home. He was in chiropractic school at the time, and he saw that I had kettlebells and was surprised. And he said, "Do you want me to show you how to use those?" And I said, "Yeah. Do you know how to use them?" And he says, "Well, I'm an RKC." And I said, "You're an RK what?" Because I didn't know what they were or what that was.
What?
And so, yeah, so I took a little kind of a one-on-one over the course of a weekend with him, like you would learn at a certification, and learned all the basics. And what really, I think, stuck to me, not to make a long story longer, but it just working with kettlebells reminded me of wrestling, and just that feeling of exhaustion. And that's the connection that I made, because up until then, like, I was just a big fan of training the way that Ross Enamite trains. I had purchased all of his books, and Ross Training on Instagram, if you follow him. I had purchased all of his books, and really changed my mindset of training following him. And I was doing a lot of sledgehammer swings, a lot of burpees, things that Ross was doing in his videos and his books, and things like that. And so I had developed this passion for that sort of training. And then the kettlebells just kind of, it was a seamless transition for me. And I was able to keep that same kind of format for training, but the kettlebells opened a whole new world to me. And I went from really enjoying, what I was doing with Ross, to like falling in love with fitness again with the kettlebells. So that's kind of that was about 14 or so years ago
So
with the
that's the
kettlebells.
first, yeah. So that's the first time you got in contact with kettlebells, like around the 2010s, right?
Yeah, 2010, 2012, somewhere in there. Yeah, somewhere in there.
It's interesting to see how actually RKC, Pavel, and the 2000s, how instrumental that was to spread the awareness of kettlebells at least, right? And then have somebody walk up
Oh
to you, it's
yeah,
like,
for
hey,
sure.
right? Hey, let me show you how to use them based on what the standard was back then, which has changed drastically right nowadays.
Yep,
The whole
yep,
Pandora's box has been open, right? Wow. And so
yep.
it gave you it gave you that, it reflected that feeling of wrestling. So you were into high school wrestling, I'm assuming?
Yeah, wrestled in high school and college. Here in the U.S., it's called folk style. International be freestyle Greco-Roman. So I didn't have any experience with that, but it was all folk
Greco-Roman.
style
Oh,
wrestling.
it's
Yep.
it's interesting. If wow, Greco-Roman. I read so much stuff about Greco-Roman wrestling when I was plowing through these books from Georg Hackenschmidt, from Dr. Krajewski, the book The Kings of Strength by Edmond Debonnet, and all these old-time strongmen, right, around the turn of the 20th century. They were all into Greco-Roman wrestling. And can you define this a little bit for them? Because I just know wrestling from from a bird's eye perspective. I don't have no insights whatsoever.
Sure.
But what's the
I,
Greco-Roman thing?
well, I would say that most people would be familiar with freestyle wrestling, and then Greco is another discipline under the umbrella of wrestling, and it's an Olympic event, as I'm sure you're aware, and probably most of the listeners. But it's all upper body, so it's about positioning. It's about and I don't have any experience with it, personal experience with it, but it's about leverage and angles and throws. And so I couldn't tell you about the scoring system, but it's all about you. There's no lower leg attacks. There's hardly any mat wrestling at all. But it's all about setting your opponent up and positioning and angles and then using leverage. And I would say there's some similarities to judo. Not that I don't have any experience with judo either, but I mean all that stuff kind of crosses over, and then it all turns into grappling under the big umbrella. But folk style wrestling, I think, has its roots in catch wrestling, and so our catch as
And
catch
that's
can.
another
And
description, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
if you're familiar with that, yeah, yep.
I've heard about the term, but if you can elaborate a little bit on it, catch wrestling, what's the difference there?
Yeah, so like in the U.S., we spend a lot of time on the mat, and so there's you start on the feet, but after a takedown, it's about controlling your opponent and holding them in different positions or scoring in ways, and then you can also score from the bottom. In freestyle, you're rewarded for being aggressive and attacking, and in folk style, you can score from uh, you know on defense as well, and so it's a little bit different style. It's a little bit, I don't know. Americans, we got to be different and everything, and so everybody else in the world does one thing, and then Americans do something just a little bit different. Just I don't know if it's to give everybody a middle finger or what it is, but
That's I think it's funny if we take it from there. It's isn't it the same with the kettlebell? Or just, I mean, martial
yeah,
arts is a discipline with thousands of intersections where everybody has some type of different idea and understanding, which is cool. I mean, at the end of the day, this brings more opinions and ideas to the table, especially if it comes from experts and people who actually know what they're talking about. But the same is in kettlebells, right? So, and my interest would be, so when you got started with that with Josh, right, from the RKC, so that
yep,
took you alongside the realm of understanding, the basic exercise, some swings, some squats, some presses, right? That stuff. And
yep,
what happened from
yep.
then on? Because I mean, if we know people who don't know you or don't follow your Instagram, we know that you've kind of adopted a little bit of a sports style approach, but with really heavy weights, right? You work with double 32s, double 40s, I think so, double 48s as well, right? Really heavy jerk, long cycle weights that are, for most of us, me included, never I won't get close to these weights, especially doubles from that perspective. So what happened from that point on when you discovered the kettlebell, discovered RKC? Great. What happened then?
Well, I think I became fascinated with the get up for whatever reason. I think because it was so challenging for me. I had this wrestling background, and I had some injuries just from competing and things like that. And like a lot of guys, I just kind of ignored, didn't address, why I was injured or why I was, limited in my range of motion. And so when I just kind of did what I could do. Um, and when I learned to do the get up, I really struggled with, um, when Josh was showing me, I couldn't complete a get up with 20 kg, and I had to drop down to a 20-pound kettlebell who had like a hard plastic cover that I bought from Walmart. I just and so I learned to get up with a 20, because I didn't have any. I bought or I traded out, for two 20s and two 24s, and so then I had a 15 and a 20-pound Walmart special, and so I didn't have the ability to to go really to a lighter kettlebell because I couldn't do it with a 20. I couldn't do it right, and that was like embarrassing to me. And so I really worked on the get up, and then as I improved with that, I was introduced to a bent press, and that just kind of blew my mind. So the get up, the windmill, and the bent press were the kind of the three things that the three movements were, um, what made me known on social media, I guess. And so I remember posting a handful of videos with two hands anyhows and get ups and bent presses and things like that. And my Instagram for what it is really kind of blew up, from being nothing to getting all kinds of views. And it wasn't because people were like impressed with me. They were making fun of me and hoping I was going to hurt myself and all that kind of stuff. And people were sharing the videos like, look at this idiot, and all that kind of stuff. But it got me views, and my account grew tremendously because of it. And I really got into, like, part of it was to get more views and to get more people watching me and all that kind of stuff. And
Of course,
and
like we
but
all
I
do.
was
Yeah, yeah.
really
That's normal.
right. Yeah. I was, the dopamine hit, whether it was good or bad feedback, I was getting it. And so trying to grow my online brand for my online business and all that sort of thing. And I had went to, this would have been back about 6 years ago now, or 6.5 years ago. It would have been, I went to the Arnold with a friend member at my gym, and we wanted to meet up with Joe Daniels from Swing This Kettlebell. And Joe lives just outside of Columbus where the Arnold is. And so we went and met with Joe and worked out at his gym the night before. And then Wes, my friend, and I went to the Arnold the next day. And that was, an experience, that's blew my mind. I had no idea what I was walking into when I walked in there. But we found a kettlebell competition, going on. And I was aware of sport. I knew that it was a thing. I didn't know anything about it other than there was events that were looked to be absolutely brutal, and I didn't understand the technique differences. To me, it was just looking at a different kettlebell, different kind of design kettlebell, and a different kind of movement. I was only familiar with hardstyle at the time, and watching some people compete with long cycle, just kind of blew my mind. And I had no I knew I couldn't do it, and I couldn't believe how difficult it looked. And because I was aware of what the weights were and things like that. And very very poor form, no sport form at all. But taking I've always kind of said that taking hard style form into a GS competition is like bringing a knife to a gunfight. You're just not gonna
You're
you're
not gonna
not gonna
last
win.
very long. No, no, no.
You
Yes.
won't survive. Yeah. So
No, no, no. You'll
um,
survive. That's a good point. Yeah.
yeah, it's just how soon will you die? While I was there and challenged, my ego completely shattered watching, people compete and doing amazing things, and realizing that I couldn't do any of that. I had learned, though, while I was there, that there was a marathon variation of kettlebell sport. And I had always enjoyed endurance snatching, hardstyle, but doing. I had worked up to doing a half marathon with a 24 kg bell, with snatch, unknowing that was even a thing. And so when I found out that marathon was an option, I reached out to the IKMF US rep, Judy, and told her I was interested. And she kind of told me a little bit about it. And I researched IKMF, and I saw that I could compete in an event that was called half snatch, which I was unfamiliar with hardstyle, just only doing snatches. And I thought, you know what, for to be competitive, and I thought this is something that I would love to do, and to try my hand at it. And then I realized, because I was already using it with the 24, thinking that I was a badass, and I found out that I had to use a 32, and I was like, oh, come on, So
Are you serious?
yeah, I was like, what, a 32 for half an hour? Who does this stuff? So that was when I kind of cut my feet with sport, and I didn't. That's when I was originally introduced to Michael, son. We had communicated briefly, just on social media, and he had saw that I was going to start training to compete in IKMF, and was asking questions, and asking if I wanted help and all that kind of stuff. And me being your standard American male, I refused help and told him I didn't need it. And I trained for my first world's competition was in Spain in 2018, and I trained for the half snatch half marathon, which is 32 kg half snatch for 30 minutes, multi switch, as many reps as you can get. And I finished with 399, and that was enough. That was enough for Master of Sport, and so
Nice.
I was really happy with that.
Yeah.
But I also knew that I didn't come anywhere close to my potential, and it was very, again, frustrating just to realize that I had wasted that amount of time and that kind of money to travel, and only to be like not satisfied. Again, happy but not satisfied, and just like. And the guy that won from Norway, Andres Jacobsen, just smashed me. And I thought, man, that's obviously much more experienced, and this was all new to me. But when I came back stateside, that's when I reached out to Michael, and I said, hey, okay, I realized that I need some help, and I'm not nearly as good as I thought I was, and I think you can get a lot more out of me. And so we started working together then, and that's when he said, he loves this story because, I mean, I might be the slowest learner on the planet, but he said he wanted to find out where I was with long cycle, because he wanted to do a couple of 2-bell workouts with me in my program, like 2 single bell workouts focus on half snatch, and then some long cycle work. And I thought, I train and compete for a half hour with a 32. I'll play your silly little long cycle game with 24s, and I'm going to knock out 8 a minute here, and then I'll go do my actual workout. And so I picked up my 24s, and I was going to knock out 8 a minute, and I did 8 the first minute, 8 the second minute, then I went 6, 6, 6, and dropped the bells at 5 minutes, and was like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever done.
A pretty humbling experience, right?
I've never hurt so bad before in my life. I can't believe. And so I messaged him. I'm like, dude, I'm a single bell athlete. Don't you ever prescribe 2 bells again? And if you do, I'm not going to do it.
Good.
Just the worst client ever, Like, hey, I'm going to hire you to make me a better athlete, and then I'm not going to do anything you tell me to do.
And I'm going to tell you how you're going to do this, right?
Yeah. Oh, just
Exactly.
just a complete shit client. So, but man, what a journey that I've been on with him since then. So, I mean, after my ego was completely destroyed, I was able to thankfully eat that humble pie and come back stronger. So, but yeah, that's kind of the brief history of getting started with sport. So.
Wow. And what is your experience when you look at, because I remember mine, but I want to know what yours was. This so you discover the kettlebell, you see, wow, cool, awesome tool. You get exposed to a way of training, probably oblivious to the fact that there's other types of training which are completely, it's not just hey, I bend my knees a little bit more in my deadlift. No, it's a completely different experience.
Yeah.
And what was your initial reaction like? What's going on? What did I learn? Or even because I remember from my perspective, I was like, why wasn't I exposed to this? Why did I only hear it from one side? Why is that not? And I've learned a little
Yeah.
bit about the history. That's why I
Yeah.
understand why that happened. But what was your reaction when you came in contact with sport?
Yeah, no, that's fair. I did the RKC, and then I did Strength Matters. I don't know if you remember Strength Matters. They were a third hardstyle company.
Oh,
Didn't
interesting.
really didn't really gain a ton of traction and didn't last real long. But
From Pavel
um,
as well?
James Breeze was the guy that kind of started that, and I don't know if you know the name Mark Rifkind or not.
Yeah,
He's
yeah, yeah.
big,
Riff.
big in the strong for. Yep, Riff. Yep.
Mm.
I got to know Riff very well, and he was always supportive of me in my transition to kettlebell sport. He was always encouraging, and his wife has dabbled in that as well, or competed as well. So he was very well aware of someone in strong force leadership, very well aware of the differences between the two styles. But he was, firmly planted in hard style, which is, totally fine. And it just got to the point where, like, the more hard style that I got deeper into, and then when I would watch a video and I don't mean to sound like sexist or misogynistic or whatever, but when I'd watch a female, snatch a 24, when for 10 minutes with one switch, and I couldn't do more than 2.5 minutes at the same pace. I thought, man, there's something out there that's completely different, and like, you just can't tell me that. And I'm watching this long cycle competition at the Arnold, where guys are jerking 32s for minutes on end, and I can't do it for 30 seconds at the time. And I thought, I'm much larger. You can't tell me that I don't have a strength base. Something's going on here that just isn't right. And my RKC experience, it was if anybody asked a question about GS, it was dismissed. It wasn't doing things the correct way. And how can something that's so effective and generate these kind of results be not the right way? And that was what, like, it just never sat well with me. And then when I tried it and was terrible at it, but you could see that, okay, there is a difference. There is something more out there. And that's just kind of what attracted me to it. It was like, I'm so bad at this, and it hurts so bad, and I want to get better at it. And I don't know why, but I mean, it really grabbed a hold of me. And I don't train anyway else now, and I don't always train for sport sets, but I'm always using sport methods and techniques in my training. And right now it's something that it's a new challenge. Like I said, that the heavier, shorter intervals are a unique challenge, just like the longer, moderately loaded intervals are a unique challenge, and changing your pace. And I love the strategy that goes into it as well. When I'm working with my clients, you don't always have to go up and load. And in fact, going up and load is usually the last thing we do. We're working on duration and pace, and different pauses and different aspects, breaking down the movements versus just, and so I find it aesthetically pleasing to watch kettlebell sport, athletes at top of their game. And it's just something that it's smooth and fluid, and I just want to stay as relaxed as possible and conserve energy. And it just clicked with me, and it took a while to get there. But I'm glad I stuck to it.
And so you had a similar experience like I have. And how can we make sense of, for example, understanding that? And this is important. I have to preface this, not knocking anything, just from a making sense perspective. And that's, by the way, one of the reasons why I had some people on this podcast who shared with me that they're very interested in learning more about the ex-Soviet methods because these guys were not into selling something. They were just pretty straightforward with this works, this doesn't work. We're not selling programs here, we're selling effectiveness. And this is where I base my understanding on. So I have a hard time if something doesn't make sense to a certain understanding, to a certain extent. And how do you make sense of this difference between, for example, a sports snatch and a hardstyle snatch? The way I see it, or the way I hear it sometimes, is yes, the hardstyle method generates more explosiveness, but if we truly look at how explosiveness is built, it has to be that 1.5 seconds that the Verkhoshansky talks about, and that even the late great Louis Simmons was talking about. If we do not hit these 1.5 seconds in reaction time between relaxation and contraction of the muscle, then we're not training explosiveness. One of the reasons why Verkhoshansky came up with the shock method, with jumping. And funny thing is, I don't want to make this too long before I answer this question, or before I let you answer, but I just recently saw a video from Werner Günther. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the guy. He was the shot put world champion, Olympic world champion, I think like 2 times, 3 times. And this guy was born a couple of miles down the road here in Switzerland, a very small little town right next to me. And he's a Swiss athlete. And I saw his prep on Instagram. It just popped up in my feed. And he was doing that shock method stuff. Jumping, exactly the way how Verkhoshansky was prescribing it. And a shot put athlete needs maximum power development, right? From a biomechanical understanding. So that being said, how do we still make sense if we know both sides of the coin of from a ballistic perspective? Because a grind, a press, a squat, I mean, that's super solid. And we need tension for these exercises, especially the heavier the weights get. I get it. But from a ballistic perspective, what's the difference, and how does it make sense between the hardstyle and the sport from your perspective?
Well, I think
even if it even makes sense, right?
Sure, right. I think for me, and I can only answer for myself, you know, I'm at the point now where, like, if I have to, if I'm taking a sub-maximal load, I mean, I'm going to move it the easiest way my body's going to move it. If I'm taking a near max load, I'm going to move it the easiest way. So, like, if I grabbed a 56 to snatch it or whatever, it's probably going to look a lot more hardstyle than it is going to be, at least to get it overhead that first rep, than it is going to be sport. But if I'm doing anything remotely that has, you know, multiple reps to it, I'm going to just automatically, my body is going to do what it needs to do to be as the most efficient as it can be. And so I don't need that ballistic force or whatever to do some maximal loads for reps on reps. But I might need that, you know, that original hinge and but again, you know, as hard as, or as your body's going to do, like you said, if you're using a heavy single bell swing for swing or snatch, you're going to be more quad dominant. Your body's going to adjust.
Yeah, most definitely.
You know, it's you can get into that hinge position, you know, with the light bells all day long. That's fine. But as soon as you have a challenging load, your body's going to switch automatically. And so, and I think that's probably the same thing as just being, you know, your body wants to conserve energy. It wants to be efficient. And you know, the more you do, the more it's going to figure that out. And that's going to look a little bit different for everybody. You know, everybody's got different limb length. Everybody's got different injury history. Everybody's got different, you know, experiences. And I just, the more I get into coaching the kettlebell with my athletes, the more freedom I let people have. I mean, when I first started, I mean, if you didn't look like me, then I'm going to, you know, change your form and make you and force you into my mold. And, you know, 14, 15, whatever it is, years later, it's like, oh, this is what you look like? Cool. All right, this is what I look like. Are you in pain? No? Awesome. Let's keep going. You know, if you are in pain, okay, let's address it and see what we can do. But, you know, are your feet glued to the floor? No? Okay. Are you, you know, completely square? No? Okay. You know, but let's take what you can do and let's build from it. You're going to look better the more practice you get, and you're going to feel better, and I don't get too worked up over it anymore. But that's just kind of where I'm at.
Same here. I also see the value of understanding that everybody moves differently, and you see it the more you work with people. It's just almost impossible to mold everybody the way you said it into this particular form or movement or style, because everybody adapts differently from factors that you've already mentioned. And you see that the more you work with people. And that's why I also realized it doesn't make sense for the way I learn things to always try to replicate this particular athlete. It
So
just doesn't
yeah,
make sense.
when I finally relented and let Michael uh, program long cycle for me, and uh, I made the switch to double bells after my second world's competition. I got really frustrated. I performed better in Poland, but still nowhere near that I was capable of. I got sick of half marathons because a half an hour is an eternity, and I wasn't gonna, I just got sick of it. And um, during COVID, then when everything shut down, Stefan from IKMF started doing some online competitions, one-on-one, and he asked me if I was willing to do a 10-minute two bell half snatch set against a guy from Italy, and you don't have to twist my arm too often to compete and to be challenged and things like that. So I decided that the jerk position is what I really struggled with the long cycle, and I just didn't have what I felt like it was a good rack, and I didn't feel like I had a good jerk. The half snatch made sense to me, and so I was doing the half snatch. So that's when I told Michael, I'm like, all right, well, let's try this half snatch for 10 minutes. I don't have to hang out in a rack position, which is very uncomfortable, and so I built up my endurance with the two bells and all that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden, long cycle kind of clicked for me, because being in rack with the two bells, because I'm practicing it, it got better and it got better. Just because I was in that position, but doing half snatch instead. But anytime you're pausing, you're still pausing in rack. And so my rack position improved, which then helped my jerk to improve. But it still was like, it's not what I thought it should look like. I watched myself on video, and finally Michael's like, Levi, like, why don't I look like I'm trying to look like Denisov. In my head, I look like Denisov, and then I watch that video.
I
And I
just
don't.
wanted to.
Yeah,
Sorry to interject. I just wanted to ask from a build. You're a heavyweight, so
yeah,
I would see a similar movement or a similar form like Denisov, which,
yeah,
by the way, I've also heard. I think from Fedorenko that his rack position is not that good. That's why he has to work more overhead or
yeah,
become more being able to relax overhead. But go ahead, yeah.
yeah. So I was like, well, I don't. And Michael finally said, Levi, you don't look like Denisov because you're not Denisov. You're Levi. You got to quit. You got to quit trying to take who you are and make you into something that you're not. And that's when it kind of clicked with me. Is like, okay, so I've got some limitations. I don't have the thoracic spine or mobility in my thoracic spine to have a great overhead position, and I just need to learn to. That doesn't mean I can't improve it. It just means it's never going to be what
Yeah.
I think it's going to be. I've got a lifetime of wrestling injuries and American football injuries and things like that you're gonna have to work around. And once I was able to like accept that, like things just they started to improve, because I didn't beat myself up over what I felt were bad reps. I mean, my reps were fine. And then I had to do a couple of competitions where I thought, man, am I I did another competition, and Sergey Rudnov was my judge, and
Yeah.
I I
Sergey,
didn't
yeah, the legend.
I didn't have any no reps. I'm like, oh wow,
All
okay,
right, it's
yeah,
solid. That's
so
good.
that must be good. And then
Yeah.
I had Dennis Vasilev review some for a competition, and again no counts. And I'm like, okay, well, if those guys are saying that what I'm doing is fine, and no offense to Coach Michael, of course, but when uh, two legends you
Yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Of
are
course.
saying it's good,
Yeah.
then okay, then I'll believe Michael
Good
then.
kind of
So
confirmation. Yeah, yeah.
right, right.
Like we sometimes have to hear it from different people, right?
Yep,
So that's the same thing from different people.
yep.
That's what it is. Yeah, most definitely. I just came up with another conversation that I had today, and he said that sometimes you have to hear. That's such a good statement. Sometimes you have to hear the same thing from different people, and
Yep.
then maybe it clicks a little bit later. Yeah. And by the way, Dennis Vasilev, I remember he was the first guy who I've had on the podcast, and I was pretty inexperienced and asked all. I think it was a 2 hour podcast. It took a lot of his time, and we also did some coaching and reviewing on my style and my
Oh
technique.
yeah, I watched that episode. Sure.
And I remember. I mean, back then, my style or let's say my development wasn't that far. I feel completely different now. It's just understanding the proper information, putting in the reps, and like you said, right, getting in the rack. And I don't even do it to compete. I just love these exercises, and from a ballistic perspective, the way the kettlebell's built, these exercises make the most sense to me, and I
Yeah.
just fell in love with them, especially the jerk. And I remember back then, I mean, my technique wasn't good, and he was so humble. He was like, "Oh yeah, well, you need to a little bit at the legs, but then this works
Yeah,
fine. It's all good,
he's
right?"
great.
I'm like, right? He
Yep.
could have ripped me apart, right, bro?
Yep.
What are you doing? What are you showing me here, man? Why are you
Yeah.
wasting my time?
Yep.
But he was very humble, like, and I think that's the realization, right? When you're in that sport for a long time, and I would assume that's probably that's a good trait of any type of legend who's been in the sport for a long time. You see that people move differently, and totally fine, right? Hey, you bang out those reps, you got those numbers, that's fine.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of people now in my case is, I'm trying to look like you, Gregory. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
You take the principles, the information, and then you apply it to your body and see how your body reacts. And I guarantee it probably reacts differently. And one thing that I want you to elaborate a little bit on, if you don't mind, is that T-spine mobility. You mentioned with the overhead fixation, right?
Yep.
So you're saying from the injuries that you had, that's probably one of the reasons why you're not able to really fixate the arms overhead and get in that T-spine extension. And could you elaborate a little bit on this? Because I faintly remember from a post that you've made on Instagram where you said, "I'll never be able to, right, have this
Yeah.
super tight fixation." So
Yeah.
yeah.
So before I got into sport, when I was doing the hardstyle stuff, I couldn't get two bells overhead, you know, at all. And I mean, I could do it, but my arms are in this position here. I couldn't lock out my elbows, and I couldn't. And it was just from being wrestling all the way and just getting hammered on and just beat on. And I'm not trying to say that I was a bad wrestler, but I mean, you wrestle in heavyweight, and there's some
Yeah.
big dudes, big strong guys, and
Most definitely.
there's more than I'd like to admit times where I felt like my arms were being ripped out of my sockets, and just that wear and tear over time, and with your shoulders and then your back. And I had a pretty severe neck injury, and my junior year of college, had a pretty severe neck injury that ended my season. And I've always had issues down my left arm with numbness, and just just all you just things that you learn to deal with. And then when I got into kettlebells, it was I just couldn't get two bells overhead. And because of that, when I got into the sports side of things, and again, you scale your load back and you work on your technique, and you start paying attention to things that all of a sudden matter. Because I had to correct it. If I wanted to compete in sport, I had to correct it. I had to improve a limitation that I had. And so, you start doing some things from a prehab and a rehab standpoint, and you working your mobility and doing some things that's going to. And so, from what I just watched a video the other day of me doing a two hands anyhow, a barbell, kettlebell, bent press with the barbell, then a press with a kettlebell. And I looked at that and I'm like, 6 years ago, I thought I was the man. I look at it now, I was like, yeah, it's heavy, but you don't count that. I mean, that looks like shit. And so if you can't lock it out, you can't fixate, then it doesn't count, you know. And so that's the mindset I have with as a
Now,
competitor now, is like, and so my overhead position, while still I would say is limiting, especially with long sets of jerks, because I'm just not super efficient. But if I can get back into my rack position, which I used to hate, and now it feels pretty good, you know, I can recover and I can continue on. But yeah, my overhead position has improved tremendously compared to when I started, and because it had to, and I had to do the things I needed to do. And again, I credit Coach Michael for you know, being patient with me, and knowing that he's working with an American with a fragile ego, and he needed to take his time, and be patient. I wish I could give my clients the patience that he has given me. That would
okay.
that would make me an amazing coach.
Yeah, patience. Yeah. That's one thing. And can you describe what happens in your case in the lockout or in the top fixation? Because from the way I understand it and the way I now am able to demonstrate it is bells overhead, so elbows fully extended. You pull. That's by the way something that took me a long time. I've heard it in the beginning, but it's the idea of, hey, yes, you extend the arms, but you actually pull the upper arm, right? You pull the humerus down into the socket of your shoulder
Sure.
blade to stabilize it. And that's like, what? How does that make sense? I bring it overhead, right? But I actually have to pull down. I have to engage my lats and get that tight fixate. Now I feel it. And now
Yeah.
it's like it works instantly.
Yeah.
And when I demonstrate it to others, they're like, oh, what, right? But how does your top fixation feel? What do you think is the limitation?
It's amazing how fatigued my triceps get, and so I know that I just that was a part of the problem with my neck injury, was losing feeling in the tricep. I don't want to make excuses, but I did have some nerve damage there, and it's just something that. But that's probably the first place I'll feel it, is the tricep fatigue and just burning, and it gets to the point then where I just can't lock out anymore. But again, it's more, a lot has to do with pacing. You know, if I slow my pacing down, and you know, or I keep the load appropriate. For me, like, one of the annoying things with kettlebell sport, obviously anybody that's done it and competed, like, I mean, it doesn't get hard till minute 7. I mean, it's hard, but it doesn't like so you have to train yourself to
Yeah.
exhaustion to even get to that point where you can work on it, and it makes the again, so it makes programming that much more important, in having a coach that can get you to that spot and then improve once you get to that spot. And that's why just watching videos or copying people online will never be the answer, if that's the journey you want to go on, or the path you want to go down. You know, finding somebody that can you know, improve your weaknesses is what's going to, instead of just working out. But anyway, so going back to that, so yeah, the triceps is a big deal for me, and then just as again, so as my lockout continues to be compromised, and then that little bit of flexion,
It
and
starts.
then all of a sudden you're not stacked very well, and then all of a sudden your shoulders start burning, and you know, so it's just once the triceps go, it doesn't take long for the shoulders
Yes,
are in trouble,
I
and then
get
once the
it.
shoulders are in trouble, then you know, you can't. So it's just a yeah. And then the other thing, like for me, for long cycle, it ended up being like, I had to, because I had that injury and I had that surgery on my arm, that really affected my grip. And so for me, it would ended up being the bell sitting on my forearm. And so the longer I sat in rack, the worse my grip got. And it took me a long time to figure that out. And so I had to actually just keep moving, because every time I could re-clean, then I could get a little bit of relief on the bell on my arm. But then obviously the more cleans you do, the more conditioning is affected, and then you know, the bicep is being worked. And so I had to find a pace that would allow me to compete at the from a strategy standpoint at the highest level. And so like 6 a minute was too slow, and 8 a minute was too fast. And so trying to figure out how I was going to make 7 a minute work without trying to do a lot of math in my head, you know, while I was tired, looking at a clock, and you know, trying to fixate every rep. And so it ended up being an amazing, like
it's the hitting master sport long cycle was this might, for anybody that's done more than that, like the coolest thing I've ever done, for me. Like when I finally did it, I was like, I don't I could have a car accident on the way home and I'm done. And like, awesome. I finally did it. I finally did something I set out to do. And that was like the most amazing. And you know how many people care? Zero.
Nobody.
Just me.
Yeah, but that's enough. That's
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah,
Well,
it's
no,
just me.
I have to. No. It's actually we have to correct this. People who know what kind of a grind it is to not just build your way up to that level, but also then perform on day X with
Yeah.
double 32s.
Yeah.
These weights, I always say they have such a tight relationship with gravity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And what
Yeah.
you're trying to do is break that relationship for 10 minutes straight.
Yeah.
They're going to fight you tooth and nail. It's
Yeah.
and me, I'm a lightweight guy, and like I said, I don't compete, but I did 10-minute sets, and I actually dabbled with the idea in Switzerland because I have folks in Switzerland who do the events to sanction sport events where I'm like, I'm a little interested in the snatch a little bit because I feel like, wow, the snatch, I'm able to work a little bit more. Because and even with the 32, I feel even more comfortable with snatching the 32 than long cycle double 32s. It's that's just such a massive amount of weight, and thinking that even lighter guys or guys my weight
Right.
are able to bang out 85, 90 reps.
Yeah.
That's mind-blowing. So
Yeah.
achieving that level means this is really something special for people who understand, right? Who are in the know. For
Right.
somebody looking from the outside in, it's like, yo, whoa, wow, great. So, right? You get more. I think you get more views, more likes, more feedback if you do a 500 kilogram deadlift, right? Which is also
Absolutely.
massive achievement. But
Right.
but 10 minutes under that load, and like
Yeah.
you mentioned, right? It's that unbrokenness
Yeah.
that is really killing you. That and
Yeah.
then these mind games that start playing.
The
And it's,
mind games are
the mind games.
terrible.
I
Yeah.
remember when I did 10-minute sets to prepare for my IKFF certs, and
Sure.
then I did 10-minute snatch sets to prepare for those 4 minutes, 5 minutes. I think Steve didn't even tell me to go beyond 5, but I practiced 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and so that when you finally are able to switch your hand, that's a relief. But then it's like, wow, you're already gassed and fatigued. And fascinating is when you try the I call it the death face or the I always say try to make a poker face instead of a joker face. So it should look like the weight is light. So no expression on the face, but the brain's exploding. Everything that's happening inside, and you then have to push yourself through it. That's resilience and determination. It really is.
That's what I love about watching the Russians, because there's no emotion on their face, and they look the same on the first rep as they do as on minute 10, and I am in pure chaos and panic about minute 3 on, and you can just see it in my face, and it's I have so much respect for those guys that look like that they're just about as bored as they can be, and they're just another training set. Yeah.
Just another. I'm just here for fun.
Yep.
Don't mind me.
Yeah,
But
it's crazy.
I had Gregor Sobochan on the podcast, which was also a true beast, a European. I think he also had the master of sport in long cycle or jerk. I can't remember. And he said the different when you work with the Russians, it's just so it's ice cold. It's like that's what you're gonna do. Nobody cares if you put it. It's like even if you do better numbers, it's always ice cold.
Yeah.
And that's what I think it was Gregor, yes, who shared that. That it threw him off a little bit because I'm like, hey, wow, I performed so well. I got 2 more reps in. Yeah, who cares? Right? It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
that's what we do. No,
Yep.
no fanfare. Nobody celebrating. No, we keep going. Right?
Yep.
And that's from the culture that these guys actually have. I see
Right.
this in the podcast. When for example, I had Funk Roberts on. Do you know Funk Roberts? You're familiar with him?
But yes, by name.
Yeah.
Yep.
And he's from Canada, and
Yep.
he has that same energy like I have. So when we get on a podcast, it's like we explode from second one. It's like, hey, what's going on, right?
Sure.
because we share that similar trait. And when I talk to, for example, Valery Fedorenko or Sergey Rudnev, that's like, well, Gregory, that's how it works. So, you perform, and you're looking for the perfect shot. That's what you're trying to do. And I'm like, yeah, but rah, 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 rah. And they was like, very calculated, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a cultural thing. So,
Yeah, for sure.
and then you look at Markov, or you look at Denisov, or you look at Vasilev. It's like that's the way these guys perform. For people who are in the know, it's fascinating.
Yeah, it is.
Let me ask you a couple of questions, Levi, about your training, because your training always fascinates me. It's you're not doing the typical sports set where you say, all right, I got my 32 or my 24, 28, and I do my 10-minute snatch set, and I'm done, thank you very much. No, you use these really heavy weights, the ones that in most gyms collect dust, the 40s, the 44s, the 48s. Can you explain a little bit about your training method? What's the reasoning behind it? And maybe share a workout that you're currently doing?
Sure. So when I'm preparing for a competition, that's when I reach out for Michael, and he programs for me. I try to go 10 to 12 weeks out minimum, just to make sure that I have enough time to progress and to perform like I want to. And know that every time that I haven't performed like I want to, Michael's had me ready. I just, up here when it comes time to actually doing it, for whatever reason. But when I'm not preparing for any competition, which is like currently, I don't have anything lined up. And I actually, after I hit the master of sport in April, and I've had no desire to get on a platform again. And so right now it's just been, because a 10-minute set, and in my mind, for preparing for a 10-minute set is just exhausting. Just mentally, you have to get ready for your longer sets. As a gym owner, I try to train in the middle of the day, but I get all kinds of walk-ins, and I get people have no idea what I'm doing. Here in the little town that I'm in, I mean, my members know what I'm doing; they know not to bother me. But if somebody walks in or whatever, and the point is there's distractions, and I try to be a business owner. You try to be, it just doesn't. I can't focus on the business and focus on myself at the same time very well, and so. If I'm not preparing to compete, then I like the shorter intervals. And so from an ego standpoint, or from just being challenged in a different or a new way, I love long cycle. It's funny for me to say that out loud because how much I hated it when I started. But I love, my thing is 2 bells overhead. If you can get 2 bells overhead, you're going to change everything about your body. If
Wow.
weight loss, strength, whatever, you get 2 bells over. I don't care if you clean and jerk, if you snatch, if you just do jerks, 2 bells overhead is going to change everything about your. And then obviously there's intensity, and then there's volume associated with that.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that? The 2 bells overhead thing sounds so powerful.
That is what changed my physique and my. Now what is, what I'm kind of, recognized for. I don't mean to sound like an arrogant, ego-driven person when I say that. I just mean to sound like if that's what has kind of made me, I guess when people give me questions or people are drawn to me from a marketing standpoint, that's typically what it is. I'm in my 40s and I want to look better and I want to feel better or whatever. Mm-hmm. So things changed for me dramatically when I started putting 2 bells overhead and doing it consistently, and doing it with load and doing it for time and doing it. So obviously with an event like long cycle, for example, for 10 minutes, I mean, you got to go lighter loads, you got to go faster paces, you got to get that volume up. Mm-hmm. But and I totally get that and completely agree that, what I'm doing right now is not going to prepare me for a 10-minute set, even with lighter loads. This is purely for aesthetics and marketing, and just because I enjoy it.
Enjoyment, so, yeah.
Those are the 3 things that are why I'm doing what I'm doing.
So if I would follow up on that, you're saying that 2 bells overhead. And I think I kind of get what you're saying. Would you, from that perspective, say a clean and press is more valuable than a swing?
Yes, absolutely. I think so. If we go back to like where we kind of started with the conversation, um, when I started with hardstyle and RKC, like there was so much emphasis placed on the swing, um, both two hands on one bell and one hand one bell. Like I could not believe like when I transitioned over to sport, like we didn't do any swings, and not that you can't use swing for grip conditioning. There's a lot of times where we'll do swing long cycle,
Yeah.
just to change things up.
Pendulum.
But
Mm-hmm.
right, and not that there's anything wrong with a swing, but I think the swing, especially the hardstyle swing, and this isn't a negative, it's so easy to learn, and it's so easy to coach, and it's so easy to implement that almost anybody can do it. And so from a marketing standpoint, if your goal is to grow your brand and get as many people doing it as you can, focusing on the hard style swing. And truthfully, here in America, most people sit, and a swing is they have weak glutes, they have weak hamstrings. A swing is a great alternative to, it's easy to learn, it's easy to start, it's easy to two hands on one bell, easy, and it's great, and it works, it's effective, and it's not easy. Doesn't mean bad. It just means it's you can use it, and so many more people can use it, and people just get, I think, in the beginning, it's super awesome, and people love it, and they're like, oh, this, I feel so much better, and then I think people kind of trail off because the only thing they can do is swing, and at some point in time, that's boring as hell. As boring as GS can be to watch, just clean and jerk or snatch over and over and over. Swings are even more monotonous, in my opinion. And so, at some point in time, a person gets tired of it, or they look at like kettlebell training as doing swings, and they don't see that, okay, that's just the very tip of this iceberg. That it's massive,
it truly is.
And once you learn how to swing, once you learn how to swing well and safely and effectively, everything else falls in line. But and so I do believe with starting with swings. But once my kids, once my kids are doing swings, fine at my gym, I train a lot of kids. Once they can swing with two hands, we don't really go back to swings. We go back to clean and press, whether it's a push press, strict press. We do clean and squat. The hinge pattern is super important, but they got to squat and they got to press. And so those are the three things that we really focus on is two bell clean and press and two bell front squats. And again, not that there's anything wrong with a goblet squat, not that there's anything wrong with a two-hand swing, but we just don't do them much once we know how to do them. And that's just kind of been what my philosophy has been. And so, two bells overhead. I prefer the jerk and I prefer the snatch, or I should say long cycle with the jerk, but those are the two movements that I use. And so one of my favorite workouts right now is going, is every minute and a half. So whatever my work set takes, so if it takes me 30 seconds, I get a minute break. If it takes me, 45 seconds, I get a 45-second break. So
it's kind of like an EMOM, but with 90 seconds, right?
90 seconds, right. And so I'll go 4, 6, 8. So I'll go heavy with four reps, long cycle, and then I'll rest until that minute and a half is up, and then I'll go moderate, 6 reps, and then I'll wait till the minute and a half is up, and then I'll go 8 reps with the lightest of the 3, so 3 pairs.
Like yeah.
And then I will take a little bit extra, so I'll wait until minute 5, and so that would be an extra 30 seconds of break. So then at minute 5, then I do just the opposite. So if I went 4, 8, or 4, 6, 8, then I go 12, 10, 8 with half snatch. So I change the load. It's the same format every 90 seconds. So I'll do 12 reps half snatch with the lightest load, and then I'll do 10 reps.
Doubles again.
Yep, doubles. Then I'll do 10 half snatch with the moderate load, and then I'll do 8 half snatch with the heavy load.
With heavy, wow,
and then I'll take I'll take some extra rest as needed. So I'll take an extra minute there. So the whole set, work and rest, and there's 6 sets the whole round, work and rest, and there's 6 sets, 3 long cycle, 3 half snatch. Will take me 11 minutes, and I'll do 3 rounds of that.
So we have that. The protocol is that 90-second EMOM, right?
Yep.
You have minute one, or 90 seconds one. Let's call it minute one. It's the 4 long cycle. Then you rest. Then you have 6 long cycle. Then you rest, and then you have 8 long cycle, and you always switch weights in between, going lighter as you progress.
Yep. As
So
the
in-
reps go up, the
As the
weight
reps
goes
go
down.
up, the weight goes down. Great. And in minute 3, this is then you completed your first giant set, so to speak, right?
Yep.
And then you switch to the half snatch.
Yep.
And then you complete that, and you do the half snatch and the long cycle. You do that in 2 rounds then. So once you have done the half snatch, you revert back to the long cycle.
Then I go back to long cycle, and I'll do that 3 rounds.
And then back to the half snatch.
Yep.
And that 3 times. So it's
3 times.
3 times the long cycle ladder and 3 times the half snatch ladder,
Yep.
right?
Yep. Yep.
All right. Oh, this is great. Great. I do. It's cool. That's why I love these conversations. I currently have one of my favorite workouts that I do is I do a lot of body weight stuff for aesthetics and muscles. Which we got to talk about this in a second about the muscle thing, because I've realized doing body weight stuff, pull-ups, dips, push-ups, squats, and body weight stuff only, burpees, that really packed on some muscle on my frame in the last couple of months without changing my diet, so to speak. It's just pulling my body weight up and dipping my body weight. That's just that's awesome. And then that's part 1 of the workout. Part 2 is heavy stuff. Then I do max bench press, max squat, and then some heavy bells for deadlifts. And then in the final part of the workout, which I like the most, is similar to yours, but not with the weight switch. I have 8. It's funny that you choose the same reps. It's when you work when you get a little bit more experience. It's double jerk with double 24s for 8 reps. That's every minute on the minute, 60 seconds. Then the second minute is 8 double cleans. Then minute number 3 is 4 clean and jerk, long cycle. Minute number 5 is 8 snatch per side with the 60-second window. And then finally 8 burpees. That makes 1 round, and I do 3 rounds. And I enjoy that so much. And every time, what I think is so fascinating, and I think you experience this too, right? I start with double 28s, which really sometimes they crush me. And then when I switch to the double 24s, I'm like, oh, that's light, that's easy. It's that shock effect that your body gets when you use a heavy. It's even crazier when I pick up the 32s. And then I go down to the 24s, I'm like, what's that? Double 12? But when I'm cold and I pick up double 24s, I'm like, ooh, that's heavy. Right?
Yeah.
That's crazy. It's kind of like that shock effect that your body gets when you have these heavy weights in place.
Definitely. Yeah.
Great. So, man, that sounds like a solid workout. What are the weights that you're using with the long cycle?
So I go in that example, I'll go 44, 2 44s with the 4 reps. I'll do 40s with the 6 reps, and then 36s with the 8 reps. And then for the half snatch, I'll do 30s for 12, 32s for 10, and then 34, 36s for 8.
Wow, that's massive, man. It's one thing that I've realized with the double half snatch is you do not have that same leverage mechanic that you have with one arm.
Yeah.
It's simply impossible. Whereas with one arm, I can throw my whole body weight into it, and I kind of like sometimes I do a little bit of a mixture between, I call it the Denisov snatch, where he doesn't really hinge. He's just using
Right.
That's
it's amazing. Yeah.
left and right, and I kind of figured that out a little bit, and I felt like, wow, that's cool. I like that. And then you can use your whole body weight and move your whole body into the weight. But once it's doubles and you got to keep them center, almost no leverage.
Right.
And you're whipping out 36s for 8 reps.
Yep.
Man, that's crazy. That's crazy. And how, and if we take it to the next level with that conversation about building muscle, where do you stand on this? Because from my perspective, since the ballistics, right, clean and press, and let's not talk about doubles, because doubles is a different world. But from a ballistic standpoint, if you use swing, clean and press, snatch, these exercises are rather cardiovascular in nature when you improve your technique well. So that's why you have these slim guys, right?
Oh, yeah,
like a Alexander Khvostov, snatching a 52 kilogram
He's
kettlebell
amazing. Yeah, he's amazing.
with ease. And funny, I commented on that video of Rostov. I said, "Wow, the first time I see you struggled a little bit." I think it was a 56 or 52.
Yeah.
Right? So from a ballistic standpoint, they're rather cardiovascular in nature once you figured out technique. So what would be your and what's your take on it? So building muscle, ballistics, kettlebells, doubles, singles. Where do you stand on that?
Well, so there's multiple facets, obviously, the things that are going on, and obviously you have to be able to eat well and eat enough to build muscle, and you have to use enough load or intensity, intensity being load. You have to use enough to challenge you, and you have to do enough volume. Because there's a lot of times where, like for example, like we'll do, and if you think a classic, I say American, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's not just American. Maybe it's, but you do, like a 5-3-1, for example. So you're doing 5, and your intensity goes up as your reps go down, and then you do the 5-3-1, and then you're done with your main lift. Which is, again, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying.
So you're saying 5 reps, 3 reps, 1 rep, right?
Right.
With a deadlift or a bench press or whatever.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Or maybe you're you start off with 5-5-5, then it's 3-3-3, then 5-3-1, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so and maybe you do an AMRAP that last set, depending on. But again, if I'm using kettlebells as my tool, my weapon of choice, I don't use a bar. I don't enjoy the bar, and so I have to do, I think, more volume, and I think that's what separates what I'm doing with what a lot of people, what you see, like you see a lot of people in the hardstyle world that'll do a ton of reps, but they're doing a very moderate load, where I'm trying to do a challenging load for me, and I'm trying to do a lot of volume with it. And I time everything. I time my work sets, I time my rest sets. There's times where like I may not go up in load for a long time, but I'm doing it faster and I'm doing it cleaner, or I'm taking less rest, and I'm able to do things. And so as I track, I like my notebook is crazy detailed on what I'm doing from week to week and how I'm progressing. And so how I want to do things and how I want to improve from week to week. So I really think that there's lots of people that do high volume. There's lots of people that do high load, high intensity. And I'm trying to combine the two, and making sure I'm getting enough calories and allowing myself to rest. And then of course there's a genetic component as well. That's, and then and I've been doing this for so long now. And I take so many detailed notes. Like I just know, like if you're not tracking what you're doing, it's really tough to progress, and based on like how you feel a given day, whether it's, you're not feeling well physically, maybe you got a cold or you didn't sleep well or all that kind of stuff. And that's all thrown off, but you have to, we have so many opportunities for excuses, and we take advantage of those, and, take advantage of the excuses far too often. And I don't think we give enough credit to commitment over time. And so like, I really think that we can reach our goals much faster than we can. Like it always takes longer than we think it should. But we don't commit that time. We don't spend enough time doing it. We don't spend enough time tracking our diet, understanding how we respond, eating certain foods. And that's hard, because everything we do is centered around, at least here, everything we do is centered around food. And, whether it's food by itself or food and drink, alcohol. I'm not saying that you can't enjoy that stuff, but I mean, you can't indulge all the time and then expect to perform as well either, and we have to, there's got to be some sacrifice involved with what we do outside the gym in order to do what we want to do in the gym. And that's just something like, I guess I'm blessed in that I'm introverted. I don't have a social life very very often outside of my gym, and I don't need it. I don't need it to thrive. I'm very happy, just spending time with my wife, and when I'm with my daughter, that's what recharges my batteries is because I have to be an extrovert at my gym all day, and so if I
man, I fully,
yeah,
wholeheartedly agree. Wholeheartedly agree.
so it's easy for me, like watching what you eat and drink. I used to be much larger, and so I don't want to ever go back there. And so like it's much easier for me to say, look, this is what got me ill, and this is what got me well, and I have to be well. Like this is my whole life. This is how I pay my bills. This is how I do everything. And so I'm not going to cut corners. I'm not going to, and I'm going to do this as long as I can do it. And as I said, I don't have to compete anymore. I probably will, but I don't have to. Like for a while there, for a 6-year run, like that became my identity, good or bad, and that's just what it was. And here in the States, I've done a good job. And I've learned I can't compare myself to people, overseas because of the lifestyle differences and but I've done a good job here. I started competing when I was 40, and 46 now, and so to do what I've done, and that what I believe is a pretty small window. I'm very happy, very proud of that fact. But it's an everyday being intentional and committed to a lifestyle that a lot of people just aren't willing to live, and that doesn't make me special, doesn't make them bad. It just, like, again, you can't live to eat and drink and then expect to perform and look the way you want to look, or you have to make some tough decisions, and we're not very good at making tough decisions.
Man, you so many good things all at once. I have to dissect that a little bit. Especially, really, it's one thing that I can that really resonates with me is being extroverted as part of your job, which I have in the gym as well as being online and the stuff that I do. So I like to spend time with my family, being very private, individual, so to speak. And I have the training is like my sacred hours. So I try to really have the training down pat to an extent where I see nobody, unless it's a severe emergency,
right,
intervenes, because this is what made me, actually, right? So, and back when I started lifting weights, and I found out actually that I'm actually one of the very rare ones that sticks to this thing and actually gets some results. I mean, for me, it was like everybody's doing this. Every trainer does this. All the clients that show up, they do it. And then I realized, wow, so I guess I'm an alien. I live on this island that I enjoy it. I follow the rules. I get results, but it seems like I'm the only one. I wake up in the morning to hit my sessions. I don't miss them. I've been trained for 15 years consecutively. Wow, but almost nobody does this. And so back then I always told myself, man, one day this has to pay off. And now that it pays off, I stick to it. And journaling, the stuff that I do, not so much as I did in my younger days, but I know my weights. I know where I'm going with the kettlebell. It's a little bit easier. It's the 24s, the 28s, the 32s and stuff. But I wholeheartedly see your point. And what you've shared as well, just a story comes to mind that we had a conversation. Angie actually had it. A conversation with a client yesterday, and she realized, like, wow, that's tedious. It's tedious work. It's she wants to lose weight, so we're currently have her tracking calories and stepping on the scale on a daily basis. And the last couple of workouts, she showed up too late, and this time she showed up early. Was like, wow, that's good. So she had an intense workout with Angie, and she had to sweat. She was like, oh, wow, that's tough, but she enjoyed it. And Angie was like facing her. We always face folks towards the mirror. And she was like, do I have to look at the mirror? I don't like seeing myself. Angie's like, yes, you got to do it. You got to look into the mirror. You got to see yourself. You got to see it. It may sound a little bit sadistic, but it is not. It is. I love that. Who said this? I think Tony Robbins said this. When the pain of your current situation exceeds the pain of change, you're ready to change.
I like that.
Right? And so face it. Face that situation. You got to look at yourself, and not you're in God's eyes. You're valuable.
Yeah.
Most definitely, you're a human being. we care for you, we love you, we empathetically want to help you, but you got to come to terms with that issue that you're having, and it's not going away by not looking at it.
Right.
And so if the pain increases, that means your inner motivation increases to change. So sometimes stuff has to die in order to grow, right?
Yes.
And I like what you said. We're not used to making tough decisions. And sometimes, and same here in Switzerland, same in Europe. It's like they're always indulging. I just had we went with Angie's parents. We went for dinner, and they invited some friends. And life after 60, I see it, right? Out every day with friends, eating out, being there, knowing every restaurant in town, knowing who's open, knowing, oh, that wine tastes better over there. You know all that stuff, which is kind of like, I understand you deserve it. You work your whole life, but life takes a very steep turn if you indulge in it too much.
Oh yeah, definitely. No, we don't. We sound very similar, man. This is cool to hear, and I've noticed, in your recent videos, you're a lot leaner, more muscular than you were not too long ago, and so I mean it's a great testament to your audience that, like, look, this is what happens when you commit. This is what is capable. I know you're over 40. I don't know how old you are, but
1984.
Okay, yeah. So you're doing exactly what people tell you can't do at your age, and that's amazing. And that's amazing because you've got this huge platform and this huge audience that absolutely is starving for information and results and living the life that you're preaching is amazing. There's not a whole lot, and I don't want to like group people together, but there's not a lot of us in our age demographic that are living what we're talking about, or I don't even think a lot of trainers anymore believe what they're saying. They're just making sales, and just that. And I get it, marketing's tough, and you gotta stand out from your competitors, and I struggle with it too, but as I said, it's I guess if you're going to get anything from me, you're going to see the same damn thing over and over and over. It's me showing up and putting 2 bells overhead and talking about it. That's what you're going to get from Levi. And you might not like it. It might not be for you. I'm going to say no to the cheesecake. I'm going to limit my alcohol. I'm going to go on a walk, and I'm going to live this really boring life that is probably not very satisfying to a lot of people. But you know what? I got a wife that loves me. I got a daughter that loves me. I can pay my bills with exercise. I've seen the world because of kettlebells, and I'm gonna keep doing what I'm doing because this is who I am. I'm totally fine being the kettlebell guy. I'm totally fine there's nothing wrong with using a bar. I don't want to use it, and so I'm not going to. And that's just who I've become. And a lot of people, I think, the more confident a person gets, especially knowing who you are, you're willing to get uncomfortable. I'm willing to get uncomfortable, physically, mentally, emotionally. You got to go to a dark place all the time to train this way. And once you're able to do that willingly and expectantly, intentionally, that's where you're going to find real change at last. That's what. There's no way I'm going back to who I used to be because it took too much damn work to get to where I am now, and I'm not just going to let it go. It's not worth it. And so. That makes me, awkward or too intense or off-putting, then, I guess whatever.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming people ask you for the magic bullet as well, right?
Oh, all the time. Yeah.
Is it? And before we jump a little bit deeper, if you have still time left.
No, let's do it.
What you talked about 2 bells overhead, and I want to jump back to the training because I think it's so fascinating the way you train, and it's also very impressive. And by the way, one of the reasons why I invited you on, and I mean, many people, lots of people forward other folks to me and say, "Hey, it sounds interesting," but I gotta find some type of connection if I check their stuff, and if I don't find it, I feel like, hey, I do this for fun. That podcast thing that's not a major platform. I don't care about it at all if somebody watches it. or listens to it. I just enjoy it because I get a massive learning experience, but I got to vibe with somebody when I check out their stuff. And so that's why when I see your stuff, it's, I mean, how tall are you?
6'1", 185 centimeters.
185, right? So
Yep.
I'm 170. And how heavy are you? Your weight?
Right around 93 kilos.
93, right? So you have 23 kg more than me on the frame. And so I'm out, and I embrace this. I think you just mentioned this, the confidence. One of the reasons why I think you and I, because I checked it on your Instagram, as one of the reasons why you and I can walk with confidence is because we know we're God's child. So if you're a part of God's family, the confidence that you radiate comes from the fact that you know where you spend eternity.
First and foremost, 100%.
Right? So that takes me, I think that brings us into a position where we have already filled the hole, the need for a deity. So that's why I don't put human beings on that pedestal.
Sure.
That's why I always, sometimes maybe I do it wrong, but who cares? But that's one of the reasons why I always kind of like try to look for flaws in philosophies and ideas, even in my own. I try to look I want to prove my theories that I have wrong. And if they're not proven wrong, I'm like, okay, I think I'm on a good track. But that confidence just I recognize I'm a lightweight guy. And I'm totally fine with it. And on YouTube and social media, where it's always all about that big and strong,
yep.
Folks like me, and that's why some people share that with me. It's like, yeah, but I'm scared that I'm not big and strong anymore. I'm like, listen, you mentioned genetics. Are you genetically built as a large human being? No. Come to terms with it that you'll never look like this guy who has that genetic potential. That's one thing. But I still am inspired when I see people like you or Denisov or even Brian Shaw and all these guys, these human behemoths who are able to move these weights. That inspires me to push my limits to an extent where I feel like, wow, I feel comfortable with these weights. I think I can challenge. Will I be able to ever bring double 44s overhead? Probably not, but I don't care.
Right.
And so bringing it back to the idea of bringing two bells overhead, giving the fact that the Turkish getup gave you kind of like an entry ticket into kettlebells.
Yeah.
What do you make out of the Turkish getup nowadays? It's a trick question.
I can't tell you the last time. Actually, it's been about a year since I've done one when I was rehabbing my arm, but I was doing it with a dumbbell, simply because I couldn't rack a bell for a while there. I think the get up, like I will never bash it because it gave me a foot in the door. I enjoyed it. Like I said, it helped my mobility again because I had ignored so many different things in my shoulders and my back from wrestling. And so I do think it definitely improves some strength and stability in my shoulders and thoracic spine. I will always be grateful for learning it and implementing it. I just don't do them much anymore. Not because I dislike them, but yeah, I guess the more I got into the sport world, the less I did them. And I just felt like, they can be great GPP. They can be a wonderful warm up, cool down, things like that. I think, depending on who the person is, they can get more benefit out of them. Like, Levi 12 years ago definitely benefited more from them than what Levi does now. But they're not something I spend any time on anymore. But yeah, I do have them. I will program them for kids. People still seem to enjoy them. And again, if you enjoy it, do it. But will the get up make you better at anything other than getting up off the floor? No. But a lot of people need help getting up off the floor. So, but yeah,
But
no, it's
yeah,
fun.
it's I'm on that same page. It's just so fun that I made this post and now I had this conversation with you, and then I always have to ask if something's fresh on my mind about the Turkish getup, which by the way I dubbed the circus getup, which some people
Right,
really not like that.
Yeah, there's some purists out there that'll
Yeah,
probably
yeah.
have you on a.
Have me on a pole, hang it up, yeah.
Yep.
But you know, from a perspective, I always like to follow stuff that makes sense, and the way it's just, you know, you mentioning how the Turkish getup gave you an entry ticket just gives me a dent in my philosophy about the getup. Where like, hey, yeah, it's not the magic bullet, but hey, it opened up the door for some people because it was so special, and now they thrive with kettlebells. Great,
Yep.
powerful. But from a true, just from a factual standpoint, objectively speaking, from the biomechanics involved, that's where I draw the line a little bit is when we say this particular exercise gave me this particular skill in physical quality.
Okay.
Unique compared to other exercises. And so my standpoint is always like, yeah, but the Turkish getup is cool if you enjoy it. And it's funny when I say something and people are like, well, does that mean I'm not allowed to do a getup anymore? Of course you are. You just hear one opinion from me.
Yeah.
Move however you want to move. You like Zumba classes, go ahead and do them, right?
Right.
And but just from an objective, from a standpoint of biomechanics, I'd argue that it's not that the getup offers you some magic benefits or the magic bullet compared to a swing, a squat, a press, and carries. This is where I'm from. What do you think? Do you think the getup has some unique traits to it?
I think that the general populace is far better off hinging and squatting and pressing than they are doing the get up. And I think if you had a limited time or limited resources, you know, you're far better off, you know, working on those movement patterns than you are a get up. Now, if you enjoy the get up, absolutely do it. You know, I think that's kind of where, but it doesn't, you know, it doesn't have to be an either or. But I mean, it does for some people, you know, like that are space and time related. You know, the get up takes a little bit more space, and you have to be a little bit more careful from an injury standpoint or damaging a floor or you know, things like that. But I maybe you've got low ceilings and you can't stand up all the way. I mean, I don't know. There could be a whole host of reasons why. But yeah, no, hinge, squat, press, carry. I mean, that's kind of what you need to focus. Lunge, twist, you know, rotate, whatever.
Yeah.
But I mean, again, it's not that it's a bad exercise. It's just been marketed. It's just been marketed as.
That's the point. That's the point.
Yeah.
The marketing gig behind it is the one thing that I question.
Yeah.
If it gets other folks a foot in the door, awesome. But I would go as far as to say it's nothing more than a marketing ploy.
Yeah.
Great exercise, fun exercise, awesome, but no chance against the long cycle from a benefit standpoint what this exercise can provide you with.
Correct.
Right? So, and this is where I come from. That's what I'm kind of like a little bit coming from. But it's great that it gave you a foot in the door. Now, you've talked about more volume from a muscle building perspective. If we jump back to that workout that you shared, that 90-second EMOM, would you consider this an approach, because you mentioned this, now you train for enjoyment, aesthetics, you mentioned that. Would you consider this rather a muscle building or an aesthetics routine compared to stuff that you would normally do if you would prepare for a competition? That's like...
Sure. No, yeah. I think I respond more physically to workouts like that. And I do other examples, you know, that would fall into that. Where you're using heavier loads, and like if it's a single bell, I'm switching more often, or I'm setting the bell down versus longer sets with fewer switches. And then with double bells, like obviously I'm not taking 44s for anywhere close to it. Like it would never prepare me for a competition, but I seem to respond to the heavier load. I seem to respond to being able to recover a little bit between sets and then push again. And then I think that using the GS formats or methods allows me to lift those heavier loads consistently over time, because I am being more efficient in my movements with that methodology or with those techniques, and that efficiency will allow me to save energy, which will allow me to do more reps over time, more sets over time.
Yeah, yeah, which equates more volume and a higher
More value.
stimulus at
Yep.
the end, right?
Yep.
Great. And these, how long does it take you to complete that 90-second EMOM? Just as long as I would, reckon if I would put the mathematics numbers behind it, like what,
Okay.
15 minutes, 20 minutes?
I just did it. I just did it on Monday. So, four long cycle reps with 44s will take me about 25 seconds, and then so I'm resting at minute 5. And then I will knock out 6 with 40 in 30 seconds, so I get a minute break. And then I will knock out 8 with 36 in 35 seconds. And then when I switch to the half snatch, I'll do 12 half snatch with 30s in about 40 to 45 seconds. I will do 10 half snatch with 32s in about 35 seconds. And then I will knock out my 8 reps with 34s or 36s in 30 seconds. And then the rest is, and so it's all about generating enough force to get the reps done quickly and cleanly. And of course you want to, choose loads that you can handle, that you're not going to, struggle with form wise, because you don't want to compromise any integrity in the movement for the risk of injury. But so it's all about, again, knowing. So I'm basically working double the rest, or resting double the work on something like that with my long cycle. And then, obviously as the load gets higher, the more rest is required. So.
And how much does it take for you to complete that workout, these 4 rounds?
So if I do the long cycle, I will do, every 90 seconds. And then after my set of 8, I'll rest until minute 5. And then I will do the same format with a half snatch. And then after that, I'll take an additional little bit break. So I'll rest until minute 6.
So you stop the clock to breathe a little bit?
No.
The
clock runs.
The clock runs.
I just add another minute. So I'll have the long cycle done and rested in 5 minutes. And then I'll do the half snatch with rest in 6 minutes. So that whole round will take me 11 minutes. And I'll do 3 rounds. So
it's 30 minutes plus.
Just over 30 minutes. Yep.
And so I'm assuming a little bit of warm up before, and then, and what's your warm up routine look like? A little bit of mobility work or some loaded work?
Yeah, a little bit of mobility work, some dislocates, I like the foam roll. Some people will tell me that I'm wasting my time, but I feel better when I do it. So
who cares?
Yeah, exactly. So I'll do a little bit of that for less than 10 minutes, just some light mobility work. And then I'll grab some bells. I'll start with some 16s. I'll do a set of 3 to 5 reps with half snatch and long cycle from at 16s, at 24s, at 28s, at 32s. Build depending on how heavy I go that day. So I'll just slowly work up, and then, once I'm ready, I'll go. Some days I warm up quickly. Some days it takes me a little bit longer. But
so you would a full workout schedule will probably take you like 45 minutes, and then from start to finish.
That would take, because I'm going as heavy as for me as I am. That would probably warm up for probably 20 minutes, and then so you're looking at 50 minutes total.
So
warm up and workout.
Yeah, and you include that longer warm up when you hit the very heavy weights.
Right. So if I did, like last week, I did a Merkin ladder with long cycle and half snatch, and I never went higher than 26s. So my warm up was basically 5 minutes. Did a couple light sets with 16s, and then I got into it because if I'm only doing 26s, but I'm not taking much rest.
Only.
Well, I mean,
I'm
heavy.
So it's awesome.
But yeah, so if I don't have to, 26 is only, and most of my work was with 24s, and so 26 is only 10 kilos heavier than what my warm-up weight is, so it's not like I have to spend a lot of time warming up.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, it's and I like that strategy to actually use different weights. I use a little bit of a similar strategy, but I like a lot of body weight stuff and barbell stuff. and I like to always crunch the workouts down to a max of 35 minutes. But
Yeah.
I see that approach, and I got to give it a shot. That sounds really awesome. Well,
Yeah,
finally, maybe, yeah, go ahead.
I'll send you an example.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah.
And for that final point that I'd like to talk about is we talked about a little bit, muscle, genetic, building, training for it, living. It sounds so cheesy, but actually just living the lifestyle. I even feel strange saying this, but it's like, yeah, not a lot of alcohol. In my case, none. Watching what goes down the hatch, making sure I show up for the workouts, and all that kind of stuff. And what happened on that post that you shared on Instagram, where we talked about muscle, right? And somebody was claiming you're on drugs or whatever. And what happened there?
Well, I get that fairly often. Not as it depends on the platform. I had posted that particular photo to a new subreddit that I don't frequent very often. And again, I'm just throwing out. Maybe I get a client out of this. Maybe I don't. It's just throwing out a feeler. So, like you're aware, the perception of kettlebells is that you can't build muscle. It's good for endurance. You torch fat. You can't. Whatever. You've heard all the marketing that I've heard. And so, my goal is to say outside of doing burpees and some pull-ups, I only use kettlebells. And there's when I was rehabbing my arm, maybe I was using a bar a little bit or a dumbbell. But it's not I don't look like I look because of a bar. I don't do a powerlifting program. I don't do a bodybuilding program. I only use kettlebells and I do burpees and the occasional rowing machine or ski or whatever. So it's strictly kettlebell training. And so my goal out there is to say, yeah, do you want to train just at home? Do you want just a couple of bells? Do you want, there's nothing wrong. I own a gym. Go to the gym. Use the gym. Nothing wrong with that. But there's so many more options out there. And unfortunately, the kettlebell marketing, I believe, has done a disservice to a large portion of the populace on what it can actually offer. And so here I am on a different subreddit, which I don't frequent very often. But I thought, I'm not on here much. Maybe what I can do is get a client or two out of something like this and say, hey, here's me at 46, and I just use bells. And I use them maybe a little bit differently than what you've seen or heard, but they've been super effective for me. And so then, of course, then people in the comments, it's on Reddit, which is a wasteland for social media, and the comments, turn into what they turn into. And because I haven't been on this forum before defending myself, the comment was, well, why don't you be honest and tell us what cycle you're on too, or whatever. And it's just, it is, I should take it as a compliment, but my mind doesn't work that way. And I just get irritated with that kind of stuff because in my mind, I see someone trying to discredit my effort over time. And I don't see myself as a special person. I see myself as a committed person. I see myself as an intentional person. And I see myself as, I know the amount of time that I've put into developing, to work on my craft, whether it's a single bell half marathon, single bell pentathlon, double bell long cycle, double bell half snatch. I know what I put into this. No one can tell me otherwise. I've got the receipts. I know how many times I've said no to eating out or no to excess alcohol or no to, I just talked with one of my members today. It's like, I can very easily be satisfied with a very limited amount of alcohol, but I can't be satisfied with a limited amount of cheesecake. And so I had to eliminate cheesecake. It's not one of those things where like, you can't have cheesecake. I can't have cheesecake because I can't eat it responsibly. I can't. And so it's not in my house. I won't eat it when I go out because it becomes a problem. And then I would rather not do the mental gymnastics that I have to do after eating cheesecake to tell myself that I'm okay, that I'm not going to go back to 300-pound Levi, that it's just not worth it. So I'd just rather avoid it. And so the amount of things that I've cut out of my life to live the life that I'm living now, I don't like people telling me I've taken a shortcut, what I perceive as a shortcut. Now, if somebody else wants to take any kind of enhancement, do whatever you need to do. I'm not one to try to limit but I'm also not going to be one to willingly accept criticism that isn't accurate. So that's just kind of where that comes from. But I don't know if I answered your question or not.
Yeah, no, it does. It does. It's yeah, and I think it will go down that route a little bit. I found it so interesting when I saw this because I even get these comments.
Yeah, you look great. Yeah, that doesn't
And
surprise me at all.
But that's the joke is I'm 70 kg body weight. That's like 140 pounds, right? That's if you'd see me in person, like I said, I'm a lightweight dude. But if I take my shirt off, it's like, oh, this guy lifts. All right, that's cool. And that's one of my main focuses is always I want to be. It sounds very superficial, but it actually keeps me focused. I always want to be photo shoot ready.
Yeah.
I heard somebody say this. I was like, I like that. I like this. Like any given day, take the shirt off. Boom, here we go. Superficial, but gives me real focus to do what I do. And of course, a host of other factors as well, why I do what I do. But that's one of them. But
Well,
even
I like to say that I am my number one resource, and so you're your number one resource. And so if you can't take care of you, I mean, your whole brand and your whole business is taking care of yourself and presenting yourself as your best version of you. And so it makes complete sense for you to take care of yourself. And there's just so many people out there that would rather just crabs in a bucket mentality and drag you down to their level and not encourage somebody to be successful, but like, well, here's why I'm not successful. The amount of times I've heard as a gym owner, I'd look like you too if I owned my own gym.
Oh,
or if
I heard that too. I heard that too. Yeah, yeah.
If all I did was work out all day, like, no,
Doesn't work like this.
Because these bills pay themselves. It's like, it's just like,
Yes,
come on,
easy.
And
Easy.
so,
Especially during COVID, right? That was very easy.
Oh yeah, super easy. While everyone was Uber eating and ordering everything offline and just sitting on their fat butt getting fatter.
Yes. Yes.
So anyway, yeah. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. I see where you come from. It's just the amount of work that goes into it. That's one thing, but I think it's what we tell our clients often is just you have to learn to say no. It's a big part of getting in shape and not getting super lean. That's sacrificing at a very high level.
Yep.
And you got to be a nerd. You got to geek out on that stuff. Like some other people geek out on cars, you got to geek out on the body. And it has to become a part of your DNA. And I think I've heard a very successful coach said that his doctor told him, since he's been lifting for 20 or 25 years straight and he always looks good, the doctor told him, like, you're at a point where even if you would want to destroy your physique and the body that you have, it would be impossible. Your brain would automatically rewire you to go back on focus again because you've been doing this for so long. And that's like the type of, when I look at a little bit the older guys, this is exactly what I want. Not the enhanced version where, people take drugs after 50 and 60 for YouTube shenanigans. That's not what I want to look like. But I want to focus on people who do better and who are a little bit older and still rock that physique, right? Where it's like, it's not hard. And I think you get that too, right? Where people say, but after 40, after 50, it's like choose any number.
Right.
After 30. People actually believe that life is over after 30.
I know it.
When in reality, your epigenetics, so the lifestyle that you lead, trump your genetics. If the life that you lead, and we tell this our clients all the time, is that we follow this no BS approach where we tell them what it is with a lot of love and empathy, but I'm not here to play games. It's the reason why you've gained weight and the reason why it's your body's changed compared to earlier is you have a different lifestyle.
Yeah.
And yes, maybe metabolism slows down to a certain extent, even though there's a great study that says it remains constant until 60.
Yeah.
But even if it was, it's a lifestyle question, right? A lifestyle game. That's what it really is at the end of the day.
No, we all have choices, and a lot of times we just choose the easy way. We choose to stay comfortable, and we choose, whether it's food or exercise, we choose not to do things that we know we need to do. and we choose to do things we know we shouldn't be doing. And it's just one of those things where if you do that long enough, you're going to get sick. And then you have an option to, make changes, and then it's hard. It's really hard to make those changes once you're sick. And someone that did it that way unintentionally, didn't know any better, but I mean, that's the life I lived. And I said, it was hard. And no part of me wants to go back. I want to be the grandpa that is, super involved in their grandkids' life, and whether it's whatever we're doing, it doesn't matter. I don't want to, like, I feel better, other than wear and tear, aches and pains. I feel better now at 46 than I ever did at 26.
Yeah, same
It's
here.
crazy. It's crazy
Same
to
here.
think.
Yeah, it's I think that too all the time. I'm like, wow, I feel way better than 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And the body, at the end of the day, right? I don't really care if you probably won't reach that genetic potential that you had in your 20s. Well, who cares? I'm not 20 anymore.
Right.
I gotta focus on that race. And
Right.
speaking of being a grandpa that still lives the life, I heard a great story from a friend of mine. He said he was when he immigrated to Switzerland. He was from Slovakia, and he immigrated to Switzerland. He was working at a shop where they were producing vegetables. And that was a really tough job. It's a farmer's work, but really, really tough job, right? Where you really got to go down and pull that stuff out. And it's just a lot of manual labor.
Okay.
And the dad of the owner, was working with him and the guys. And so he turned to his dad and said, "Hey, why are you still doing this?" And he said, "Well, it's simple. When I stop this, tomorrow I'll stop walking. Next week, I'll lay in bed. 1 month from now, I'm dead."
Yeah.
Trying to be as active as possible, right? With manual labor. I mean, what we do in the gym, right? That's what we sometimes tell our clients too, is we resemble what we had to do as human beings hundreds of years ago.
Right.
We resemble movements that we have the luxury today of avoiding, which can bite us right in the behind.
Yep.
Unfortunately,
you're
nowadays, right?
exactly right. Yep. No. Yeah. It's a slow death, and then all of a sudden it's too late. And so.
Final question before we wrap it up. What type of kettlebell program? Because I see where you come from. I have to preface this a little bit. I consider the kettlebell as the almighty GPP tool.
Yeah.
Takes care of strength, muscle, mobility, endurance, and I always say it's the jack of all trades, but the master of none. But general fitness is what GPP is. General fitness. So that's why it makes this tool so powerful. So how would you program a workout for a client who says, "Levi, I only want to, like you, I only want to work with kettlebells. I have a range of weights at home." Let's say he has some decent technique. How would you program the workout to focus it rather on muscle? Would you eliminate the ballistics, or would you say only grinds, or would you say no, ballistics but heavy?
I'm such a big fan of ballistics. If a person is competent, that's what we would focus on twice a week. In this made up scenario, which really is a fairly common scenario. Double bells twice a week, single bell once a week. I do believe that the single bell training offers, I said 2 bells overhead is my deal, but single bell offers something that double bells don't, and that's from a conditioning standpoint, a grip standpoint, the ability to go a little bit heavier on one side at a time. I think every time I'm doing a 2 bell workout, I think, man, I really wish I was doing a single bell workout. And then I get into a heavy, hard single bell workout. I'm like, geez, I really wish I could take lighter bells and hang on to it. It's just there's so much to it that eliminating one is a problem. And so again, because of my philosophy, because of who I am, because of the results that I've had that I enjoy, like workout 1 and 3 would be 2 bell focus ballistics. And not that you wouldn't do grinds with it, but then workout 2 in the middle there would be a 1 bell focus. And then there's nothing to say that if a person had like odd bells that we wouldn't do, one bell, 1 and 3, and 2 bells in the middle. But I do like the focus then would be, getting those loads overhead, depending on, certain variables, and then also squatting. We got to squat. If they're able to lunge, if they're able to rotate, things like that as well. But the focus then would be, I really think that there's a much smaller learning curve with one arm long cycle, speaking of single bells, or one arm push press, long cycle push press versus a jerk. If a person's never going to compete, I could care less if they ever did a jerk. Push press is more than enough. And then same with 2 bells as well, push press versus jerk. But if they're able to jerk, that ballistic movement, I think is. But again, there's a time and a place for strict press. There's a time and a place for all that stuff. So just depending on, I use the long cycle movement as the main lift, and then we'll sprinkle in some longer sets with like clean and strict press, or just cleans, or that's when we would do high pulls and swings, as a little bit of GPP to support the long cycle. But that's just kind of a real quick. And then I always, unless a person is competing in snatch, I always do half snatch. I just think that there's for the lay person, the generalist, there's such a better carryover, less recovery time tied to the half snatch versus, the full snatch. The full snatch is an amazing movement. I think it's awesome. But I mean, if you're going to compare half snatch and regular snatch, I think the half snatch is easier to learn, and easier to get high volume in, easier to get more loading in than it is with just the regular snatch.
So focusing rather on double bell work, or just like you said, right, can be singles and double in the middle, but doubles will be prerequisite. And the exercise selection, this long cycle, press, some snatch. And funny that you're talking about the swing, that's something that I wanted to mention. That's something that amazed me when I realized, what? You sport guys don't swing?
Yeah, not very much.
Huh? It's like, I thought, what? Speaking from the standpoint, learning the typical hardstyle, strong first, RKC stuff, it's like the swing is the exercise. Then you look at the sport folks. It's like, well, we don't swing, or maybe just the Russian pendulum, right?
Yep.
Easy.
Yep.
That's fascinating. That's too. But you would say, all right, long cycle press, snatch, and you mentioned the squat. What makes the squat, in your opinion, so powerful?
Well, it's your foundation to everything. If you think about, like, for me, for long cycle, one of the huge problem areas is my quads. You start getting tired, and they're burning, and standing in rack and trying to relax, and you've got, in my case, 64 kilos on your chest, and it's just like, again, I'm losing. It's one thing leads to another, and pretty soon you're a whole mess, and you can't even stand up anymore. And so, the foundation, the amount of people that need to be able to squat, that can't squat, that's America. It's just, you don't have to squat heavy, but you should be able to squat. And so whether that's a goblet squat or an unbalanced rack squat, and I prefer 2 bell squats, but I think the clean squat and then the clean and jerk are the two. If there's 2 movements that offer the biggest return on your investment, it's those 2. Recleaning between every squat, and then recleaning between every jerk. So your typical long cycle by definition, and then clean squats is what I refer to them as. But I think those are the 2 things that if a person was to do one thing, I would say long cycle. If a person was to do 2 things, then I would say add the clean and squat. And I just think you get a hinge, you get a lower body push, you get a upper body push, you get with all that kind of stuff. A lower body pull with each clean, so I mean, it really checks all the boxes. And then, to make things more fun and add variety, then you've got the single bell variations, and you got the half snatch variations, and you got carry variations and all that kind of stuff that really tie it all together. But that would be.
I really fell in love with carries long time. I've been doing now lots of carry work, and I love it. It's just there's something to it picking a heavy bell, especially one-sided,
Oh yeah.
that wants to rip you apart, and
Yeah.
again has that close and tight-knit relationship with gravity, and you're
Yeah.
trying to separate it. I love it, and I like that approach. And just one remark, which I think is so interesting. That's why I asked you about the squat. I think it's now 80 conversations that I've had on this podcast, and throughout almost any conversation that I had with, whether that be athletes or trainers, finally, I think there's one common denominator, because in fitness, everybody has a different opinion, right? It's almost impossible to find people who are a little bit aligned with each other. That's what I've learned from Gregor Sobochan as well. He said, I trained with Sergei Rutnev, I trained with Denisov, and I trained with Fedorenko. 3 completely different approaches. Completely different. Yeah. And so, but one common denominator that I can finally make out, thanks to this podcast, is the squat. Almost everybody unanimously agrees that the squat is one of the best and greatest exercises that you can do, and that almost everybody should do.
Yeah. And plus, I mean, as well as anybody, you get 2 bells in rack, and what your body has to do to stabilize that, to get up and down is,
front squat.
The front squat is rough. So
clients always shudder when it's like,
yeah.
Squat, double bells. Oh no.
Yeah, no, it's me too.
It wants to squeeze your organs.
Yeah.
When you feel it. And one thing that I've learned, I think I've learned it from a recent Olympic athlete on his Instagram, and that really helped me. I understood the mechanics of the squat, but he pointed it out with a video that was really, really helpful, where he under the bar, but it's a little similar. Well, the double front, it's a front squat, so a little different, but chest out, knees out, hips back. And since I'm focusing on these 3 cues, my barbell back squat immediately improved.
Nice.
It just feels so much better when you have the chest out and push the hips back. You get down, and I like to do a pause squat, where I have the bar on my back and I rest a second down, and I feel so comfortable.
Nice.
Even with the double bells. But the difference with the double bells is the weight in front of you, it wants to really bend you forward, right? And you really have to have that positioning, which is double front squats, especially with heavy kettlebells. Oh my.
Yeah.
From the hole back up.
No, that's awesome that you're using some serious loads for your body weight, man. That's great.
Yeah, but funny thing is, I was never really, that's something that I realized too and recognized early. I was never really a strong lifter. I never had crazy numbers. When I was young, probably 110 kg on the bench, maybe 140 on the squat, and 170 on the deadlift, and I was never able to pull a 200 kg deadlift. Maybe with some proper coaching and technique and proper loading, maybe. But I've realized early on that this is not my forte. And I think it shows a little bit that if I'm thinking of competing, I probably would go towards a snatch set.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I'm a little bit stronger in the endurance realm. But no, I'm trying to challenge my body with weights that really, especially with double bells. I love the jerk, and the long cycle is a little bit of a love-hate relationship, because the clean is such. Sometimes I feel like the bells rip me apart, and if I do the pendulum, I feel like my piriformis acts up. I'm like, But other than that, the jerk is one of my main lifts that I love, and I try to do it the double 32s, which is like maybe 2-3 reps, and then I have to drop them back down.
That's a lot of weight, man.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, I want to push myself to an extent where I feel like my 40-year-old me and my frame can handle that weight without being negatively impacted.
Yeah.
Levi.
I had fun, man. Thank you for this.
Me too. Thank you. Was it awesome and a great conversation? And I think it was good that I stepped back from podcasting a little bit, because I felt like I was doing a way better job with listening, because sometimes when I do these, I have the gift of gab. I can't stop talking. And sometimes it gets, I read the comments as well. And so I get a lot of constructive feedback where I've learned, okay, I got to shut my mouth a little bit more